Just finished reading Solenoid by Mircea Cartarescu. This is one of the craziest books I've ever read. I loved it. Um, so it's the diary of an alternate version of the author, Mircea Cartarescu. So he kind of launched his career as a writer um, by reading this epic poem that he had written at a writer's workshop in Romania in the 1980s. And in real life, his reading was very well received, and all these famous writers who were at this workshop supported his literary career, and he started publishing things. In this book, the poem was not well received, and he gives up on trying to ever publish anything. And then the rest of the book is just like what the rest of his life looks like after that. Um, which sounds like it would be really boring. This author's life if he had never become an author. He ends up just continuing to work as a uh, school teacher, a teacher of the Romanian language, in Romania. So like obviously that would be like literature and language arts. Um, the equivalent of an English teacher in an English speaking country. That was his actual job before his writing career took off. And in this book, he stays in that job, which sounds like it would be really boring. Just this, 640-page book about a language arts teacher. But the book is very surreal. There are parts of the book that are like surreal and dreamlike stylistically, but they are presented as actual events that are real within the narrative of the book. And then there are also parts of the book that are surreal and dreamlike because they literally are dreams that the narrator is recounting. Um, the title of the book comes from the narrator's house, which is his house is like has all these spatial anomalies. It's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. The rooms don't stay in the same places. You can never like memorize the layout of the house because it's constantly changing. Um, but within the house, there is a solenoid, which is like I don't know, I don't really understand technically what it is, but it's like a coil of copper wires, like a giant coil of copper wires that I don't know does something with electricity. But in the book, these solenoids have like supernatural powers, and there's a bunch of them underneath different houses around the city of Bucharest. Um, and one of them is in the narrator's house, and among other things it allows him to like float. It basically like turns off gravity within this one room. So he's able, and the room happens to be his bedroom, so he's able to sleep by floating over his bed. There's other weird stuff in the house, like there's a room that has um like a dental chair, and then it's got this transparent floor, and you can see like these coiling like wires or almost like worm-like things under the floor, which is very very interesting. And interestingly, like dentistry is a recurring image throughout the novel. There's a lot of recurring images throughout all of the dreamlike stuff in the novel. There's dentistry is a big one. There's a lot of dental chairs in the book, and people going to the dentist, and particularly it's about like the pain and suffering of being at the dentist, particularly as a child. Um, Butterflies and moths in at least one instance, but it's usually butterflies. That's another recurring image. Parasites, all kinds of parasites. Particularly, there's a long section about mites, which I mean, not all mites are parasites, but yeah, parasites are a big thing in the book. Um, what else? A lot of statues. There's a lot about statues in this book. Uh, Yeah, those are the four big ones that come to mind. Also, there's the narrator is very interested in the Boole family. So George Boole was a very important mathematician. I don't know a whole lot about math at the theoretical level like that, but he's the founder of Boolean logic, which is a big thing in math. Um, George Boole was married to another important mathematician named Mary Everest, and they had a daughter. Well, they actually had a bunch of daughters, but one of their daughters was um, Ethel Lillian Boole, who later married and became Ethel Lillian Voynich. She's really important because so she was a communist and she ended up traveling in Eastern Europe um, like shortly before all of the communist revolutions there, I believe. And met a lot of people who became important during that era. Um, but she also wrote a novel called The Gadfly, which the narrator read as a child and loved, and that novel is um, brought up frequently throughout this novel. And The Gadfly is like it's it the it takes place during the wars of Italian unification, if I'm not mistaken, but that's sort of like allegorical. It's actually based on her experiences meeting all of these like revolutionary figures in Eastern Europe in the early 20th century. And the novel The Gadfly was very popular um, within the Soviet Union and other communist countries during the 20th century. Uh, and another interesting little connection is that Ethel Lillian Voynich, you may recognize that surname, she got married to Wilfrid Voynich, who was a antiques dealer and rare book dealer, and he gives his name to the Voynich manuscript, which was um, some sort of alchemical treatise, maybe. It still hasn't been deciphered. Nobody's been able to figure out what the words in the Voynich manuscript say, but it's got all these weird illustrations. Um, I think we still don't even know exactly when it was written, like maybe Renaissance era, but it was kind of passed around between different people throughout the early modern period, and then it ended up in the hands of this rare book dealer, Wilfrid Voynich, who was married to Ethel Lillian Voynich, author of The Gadfly. And it was during his ownership of the manuscript that it became famous, and so his name is attached to it. And the Voynich manuscript appears as a plot point in this book as well. So lots of interesting things that the author was interested that get looped into here. Um, Thematically, this book seems to be very concerned with suffering and the ubiquity of suffering in human life and the way that people struggle against suffering. There's a like protest movement in the book of these people who are protesting against death and suffering, and they have I wish I had bookmarked it. They have um, there's a couple different points in the book where we get to read all of the slogans that they use in their chants and on their protest signs, and it's like down with death, down with slaughter, down with disease, like as if all of these things are something you could protest against, as if like there's some intelligence that's imposing these things on us that we can rebel against, which is a really interesting concept. It's kind of funny, but like it also seems to be tied to what Cartarescu is trying to say with this book in a more serious sense. Um, the book is also really interested in uh, the role of an artist or particularly a writer and what it means to be a writer if nobody's ever going to read your work. Um, so Mircea Cartarescu in real life, as well as the version of him in this book, they're both big fans of Franz Kafka, and they both deeply admire the fact that he kept writing and was such a good writer, even though like none of his stuff was really read within his lifetime. Um, and that's a recurring thing in this book. And then of course, obviously, the whole conceit of who the narrator is the version of Mircea Cartarescu who has a life more like Kafka. Um, so that was really interesting, and that's I feel like a big part of what Cartarescu is trying to say with this book. Um, to go back to the butterfly imagery though, it feels like transformation is a recurring thing throughout this book, and like mostly like transformation in a positive way, I would say. Not transformation in the sense that you might find it in The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, um, but more of like the kind of transformation that a butterfly goes through. That seems to be something that's happening to the narrator throughout the book. And I don't, yeah, I would say it's a transformation mostly in a positive direction, but also things get weirder um throughout the book, and it's almost like the first half of the book, like the narrative itself is like a caterpillar and then becomes a butterfly in the way that like these surreal elements and like just weird images they explode outwards and become bigger and more vivid towards the end of the book. There's some really crazy stuff going on at the end. Um, there's a sequence where the narrator uses one of these solenoids under one of these buildings in Bucharest to transfer his consciousness temporarily into the body of a mite on someone's skin, and he like lives for hours in our time, but somehow it's years for the time of the mites. He lives among them in their society, and he tries to become like a messiah for them and to teach them about the world outside of this guy's skin that they live on. And they sort of start to understand it, but then like it just gets abstracted into this religion that misses the point of what he was trying to teach them or whatever. That was crazy. Um, there's a really crazy image at the end of the book that I feel like I'm not gonna spoil, but if you read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about in like the final 30 pages or so. There's some really crazy stuff happens. Yeah, I really love this book. I think there was a point in the middle where it dragged a little bit. I think like I read this is a 640 page book. I read the first 300 pages very quickly, and I read the final 150 pages very quickly. In between there, um, I slowed down a bit. I was still enjoying most of that middle chunk. What would that be if 200 on the front went really fast, 150 on the back. So yeah, I mean then there's like almost 300 pages in the middle that I think I read much more slowly. Um, But of that 300-ish page chunk, I think I really, really enjoyed probably about 200 pages. There's maybe only about 100 pages at most that felt like a slog. And it's like right in the middle of the book. Uh, but yeah, I mean, overall, I loved this book. I mean, I've been saying that about the last several books that I've read, but I think I've just gotten really good at picking books that I'm gonna like. Although I didn't really pick this one. It was a buddy read with some people in a Discord server. But uh, yeah, I do own. I think I have it right here. Yes, I do own Blinding by Mircea Cartarescu, or Blinding Volume One technically, because Volume Two and Three have not been translated into English. Sean Cotter, please get on that. Uh, this I've heard also has a lot of butterfly imagery, so I think it'll be interesting to read this and compare what's going on with the butterflies. Um, and I think butterflies are part of the structure of this trilogy because this volume one is called The Left Wing, and then volume two is subtitled The Body, and volume three is subtitled The Right Wing. Um, but it's also like about the author and his mother and his father as like the two wings in the body of a butterfly. So I'm looking forward to this and seeing how it compares and maybe understanding more of what interests Cartarescu about butterflies. Uh, but yeah, do I have anything else to say about Solenoid? Probably, but not anything I can think of right now. Yeah, yeah. I there's a pretty large cast of characters that I really enjoyed. I always love a book that has a lot of just weird people and gets into their psyche. Um, it's mainly the other teachers in the school that the narrator works at. We learn about a lot of the other teachers and the principal, and they're all weirdos, and some of them are lovable weirdos, and some of them are just kind of disgusting, depraved weirdos. But I loved hearing about all of them, and yeah, um, yeah, I strongly recommend this book. Uh, I will read it again, probably after I read Blinding. Uh, And yeah, Cartarescu has a new English translation coming out later this year. I think the original came out in Romanian like 4 years ago, but the English translation by Sean Cotter is coming out in, I want to say, October of a sort of historical adventure novel. Um, so that'll be interesting to see how Cartarescu does that. Uh, yeah, so that's my thoughts on Solenoid. And this was a pretty long book. I read some pretty long books before this one. I'm still in the middle of one or two other really long books, but I think I'm gonna give myself the next few days to read something very short. So I should be back here on YouTube pretty soon talking about whatever short book I choose for that. Because I sometimes after reading a bunch of long books, I need to read something really quick as almost like a palate cleanser. Not that I need a palate cleanser from this because I didn't like it, but it's just it's so much. It's a lot, you know. It's like you could eat a beautiful meal and everything about it is wonderful, but if it's like an enormous meal, you might need like an antacid, right? And that's there's nothing wrong with the meal, but you need that after. So I'll be reading something short soon, and I will be back here after I'm done.